Now, Michigan is one of the latest battlegrounds into the fight for LGBT equality. Now, Michigan has a same-sex marriage ban written into the state constitution that is being challenged by a couple that filed a lawsuit in April of 2013. Now, they want to marry each other and adopt each other's special needs kids. Sounds great. That's a great thing to do. I love it. Now, there are some expert witnesses in this federal trial trying to protect the sanctity of marriage involving one man and one woman, also known in the Bible as, wait, you couldn't find a concubine? Because we all know that traditional biblical marriage was not one man and one woman, and even if it was, we are bound as a nation by secular law and the Constitution, not religious law. Let me get that straight. Now, but this final witness, named Douglas Allen of the National Organization for Marriage, offers a point that would be really, really difficult to argue with. He testified that unrepentant homosexuals would be eternally damned to hell. I don't know about you guys, but that seems like a really, really airtight argument. There is one sort of problem I found with his testimony, though. I'm wondering if Allen's personal religious beliefs had anything to do with his claims that some scientists didn't agree with research showing no differences between children raised by same-sex couples and heterosexual couples. There's absolutely no difference. Now, Raw Story reports that a spokesman for the Michigan Attorney General, a defendant in the case, told the Detroit News that Allen's personal religious beliefs have had no impact on his research and the results it reaches. Whew. Oh, well, that settles it. So the premise of this case is that the National Organization of Marriage actually isn't denying gay people the right to marry because they hate them. No. No, they're just looking out for the children who haven't been shown to grow up any differently with two moms or two dads than growing up with a mom and a dad. No, and of course, that they're just trying to save unrepentant gay people from the eternal hellfires of torment. Well, when you put it that way, it makes you sound like you're doing gay people a favor, instead of selfishly denying those people the same rights that you actually enjoy yourself. I see now. It's all about messaging. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Well, like for me, really kind of the argument that he doesn't, or kind of the reason why this Allen person doesn't want these two kind of women to get married in this specific case, like for me, you've got two women, both of which, it seems in the article, already have their own children. So you've already got a case of one woman looking after one child and another woman looking after another child.
Let's be clear, they're both adopted, by the way, and they're both special needs children.
Yeah, so you've got one woman looking after one adopted child, and you've got another woman looking after another adopted child. And he and the rest of his cohorts don't want two women looking after two adoptive children. He just doesn't want. He just wants to kind of keep the two things completely separate. He doesn't want them to go together, and it just seems ludicrous. And then the whole, that if they don't repent, then they're going to end up in hell. Prove that a hell exists. You can't do any of that. You can't. It's just nonsense. And his attorney saying, "Oh, well, his personal beliefs don't influence him at all." One, that's a lie. Even if I didn't agree with his, his hateful position, everyone's kind of research is in some way skewed by their own personal beliefs. What other academic papers they've read. You've made an active choice in what papers you decide to read and what you haven't. So it's just absolute nonsense what this guy. And the fact he's considered an expert by a judge is beyond belief.
Yeah, and he's actually an economics professor. So he's not even an expert in anything other than economics.
If it had been theology, maybe like philosophy, social studies, like something like that, then I can kind of maybe say, okay, he can be considered slightly valid in this sort of discussion. But economics has nothing to do with this whatsoever. So okay, I can consider myself an expert in media. Doesn't mean I can go and talk about astrophysics, in a court of law. Just because you're an expert in one thing doesn't mean you're an expert in another. It's just ridiculous that he was called as a witness.
I couldn't agree more.
Well,
Sean.
I mean, like, I'm going to say why it's ridiculous, but an economist testifying isn't the most ridiculous thing, since the questioning seemed to be in line with how will the children do, and, like, I guess an economist, would predict how they would do economically in a same-sex household or whatever. But that's ridiculous because that's about gay people adopting children. That's not about them getting married. Like, they can't have, like, if they get married and they don't want any children, then that argument is completely irrelevant to the case. So
yeah, like they're already adopted. That has no bearing on it. It is just, as I said, putting the two kind of people together.
I know, but they're suing they're suing, like, part of their suit, or the reason why it's in the news, is that it's about, like, gay marriage, and there's no law that says that anybody who's married has to have children. So the children argument, although it's, like, somewhat fits into this particular case, as an overall precedent, should have nothing to do with how we feel about gay marriage or not.
But not only that, but like, isn't it really kind of hypocritical of this whole thing, like saying that no, we're not going to allow these two people to get married and then adopt each other's kids, when there's so much research, and they say all the time, conservatives are always like, we need two-parent families, but only the type of two-parent families that we approve of. It's hypocritical.
Yeah, like, and there's, like, the studies that say if you're raised by two gay people, then you're probably better off than even if you're raised by two straight people, and that just has to do with people adopting kids, because people who choose to be parents are usually better than people who it just happens to. So, like, it's just that they're not that different, but that's not the overall issue. The overall issue is this guy is the so-called expert, and he's testifying about how they'll burn in hell. Which, if I was the judge, I would be like, well, if they're gonna burn in hell anyway, then I have no, like, real authority here, because it's in God's hands. So I'm just gonna let them roll with it, make their own choice, and we'll see them in the fucking, in the Lazarus pit or whatever.
Well, I mean, the thing as well is that, like, when you read the article, okay, you don't get the sort of tone that this Allen guy responded me, because the question was, the attorney asked him if he thought homosexuals were eternally damned, and his reply was, not repentant, yes. And it's kind of like it just seems the way it's written, and I imagine how it's kind of said, it's just like, well, of course, if they're not repentant, of course they're going to hell. It's obvious. Why don't you think that? And you're just like, but what do you mean, of course, though? Like, it's just nonsense. Like, how do you know, sort of thing? He's supposed to be an expert, and he's claiming, like, he's just making unfalsifiable claims. Just mental.
So a part of me, and I'm going to let Jordan jump in eventually, but a part of me kind of wants them to rule against this couple, just because I want to see the part where the judge is like, well, everything that the gay couple said made perfect sense. But then again, unrepentant homosexuals would go to hell. So I had to be swayed by that. So that would be kind of funny just to read that. But obviously I hope that they win and Michigan's ban on same-sex marriage gets overturned.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. This is going to lead to the same-sex marriage ban being overturned here in Michigan, which is going to be another victory for the LGBT equality. I mean, it's coming, especially now that just a recent report just came out that 59% of Americans say that, hey, gay marriage, it's all good. Now we have even more approval of same-sex marriage. But Jordan, we haven't heard from you yet. Jump in as our Christian.
Yeah. First, let me start off by just go ahead and doing the despicable thing and getting it out of the way. I do want to defend the guys, or some points that were made. One, Jeff, the biblical marriage equals concubines thing is a ridiculous argument from the left. Because in biblical narrative, anytime you see a character with concubines, that's presented as a negative thing. It's actually ultimately what Solomon is judged for and Israel collapses for in the Old Testament narrative. So there's that. But again, like you said, regardless of what that says, we're a secular nation of laws. We're not a theocracy, so it doesn't matter the way the Bible defines marriage. That's not, what dictates our laws. And then also, Sean kind of brought this up, but like, I'm not going to give him too much grief for being an economist. I guess I would really need to see the specifics of what they're arguing for. But if you're trying to say that if you're trying to make a case that gay people raising kids, is a bad thing, then it seems like, from a perspective of the economy, which affects all of society, like, I don't know, that seems like, I think it's an absurd argument, but it seems to be consistent. I would argue it's more relevant even than a theologian or a philosopher, because why is a theologian or a philosopher in court? Like an economist is talking about an issue that, the courts, have to deal with regulations in the economy. So there's that. But yeah, and then to Stephen's point about the unrepentant thing, typical Christian theology, regardless of what the problem is, if you're unrepentant, that would be the position you take. I guess my issue is, why did that question come up in a court case? Like what does where people go to hell? Like, how is that at all involved in? It just seems like a silly thing for a court to ask at all, or to be discussed in court. So now let's get to the actual, the meat and bones of it. Yeah, the guy is crazy. Again, not only from a statistical secular view, but again, like from a Christian view, man. Like, okay, so you want to take the position that, as a Christian, you think that marriage should be between a man and a woman. All right, and so maybe you want to extrapolate from that kids being raised in a homosexual marriage, is not ideal or whatever, even though the data doesn't support that in any way. Well, what's also not good from a Christian worldview is orphans and kids growing up without a family. So, like even if you say, a gay family is not ideal, well, surely it's better than no family, especially given our foster care system, in the shape that it's in here in America. Like, why would you not want these, to Sean's point, like people who are actively going out and taking kids that someone else either didn't have the means, to raise, or chose not to for whatever reason, or that was taken away from them. Like, these people want to take these kids. They're probably going to be pretty good parents. They're certainly going to be better than no parents. So I don't know. It's just it's kind of a silly position to take. And I do want to point out too that he argued, apparently the guy turned to ancient philosophers such as Cicero and Plato, again, who had nothing to do with the Constitution. But Plato was gay. You're going to use a gay dude in your argument against gay people raising kids. For Plato, eros, the Greek word for erotic love, homosexual eros is the basis for philosophy, which to Plato is obviously important. Now, but Plato did speak against homosexual acts.
First of all, it was just kind of this Allen guy didn't talk about philosophy. It was the fact that the federal judge decided to choose to hear Allen's testimony as an expert,
Gotcha.
rather than a Yale law student who was going to be talking about the historical definition of marriage.
Oh, okay, you're right. Well, then my whole plan's completely gone.
Yeah, and which would have been a more valid defense of marriage, because you can't look at marriage as just a Christian institution, because marriage and kind of the concept of a man and a woman, or two people being together even, exists.
Oh, okay, yeah, so I see.
Yeah,
I see what you're going with. They were going for a non-Christian defense of. Okay, I'm with you now.
Yeah, and let me point out the economist thing. Bringing on an economist to argue against families seems like it really sort of undermines that entire position. As in, when people are in family units, they usually do better economically than single parents. So bringing in an economist to make this point undermines his entire point anyway. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
And in response, Jordan, to what you'd asked of why they would bring in that kind of argument into the court, I think it shows how much influence I think religion has even on our supposed secular system, especially hearing these sort of arguments in court.
You have to.
Well, but they didn't hear the argument in court. So.
You have to question the judge, though, because it was a judge who decided to reject this first witness who was going to talk about the definition of marriage throughout history and so on, and rejected that guy over this evident kind of fuck it. I mean, he's a crazy person who thinks that and stuff. So Like, why did the judge must have known the characters of both these men before going. He didn't just say, oh, I'll just randomly reject this guy and choose this other guy instead. Why did he bring in this guy into the kind of a court of law?
There could be multiple reasons. One, because the judge might just be a conservative judge who believes that gays shouldn't get married. Yeah. Or two,
no, but I'm sorry to cut you off. The other guy was going to argue the same thing. He was offering a historical defense of marriage between a man and a woman, and the judge wouldn't let him in.
You know what?
That's going to be my second point. Is the prosecution, or not the prosecution, both sides like to debate whether a witness is valid. Maybe they wanted the guy who didn't know anything to testify over, like it was a really an uncontested witness, as opposed to the historical guy. So maybe the people defending the gay couple didn't fight as hard to get rid of the idiot as they did to get rid of the guy who looks like he might know something about history.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the case of either the judge, like the judge is maybe in favor of gay marriage, and he thinks, actually, if I put this idiot in front of everyone, he's going to say something stupid, and it'll make kind of the gay marriage case much stronger. Or the judge could be conservative and go, no, this guy is absolutely right about kind of the unrepentant sin. Like, this guy's going to make a strong case. Like, this is really good stuff that he's going to say, so that's why I'm going to bring him in. So
yeah, you can't argue against that eternal hellfire.
Right, and to get to my point, to get to Jordan's point about these gay people trying to adopt kids and how they're way better off than kids that don't have families, you gotta remember that literally nobody likes little kids, right? Like I remember a couple of years ago, my favorite news story of all time in 2008, Nebraska changed their law that allowed people to abandon kids that were up to the age of like 16 or 17 at local hospitals, and a woman from Atlanta drove 1,000 miles to beat the deadline to abandon her 12-year-old son in Nebraska. Like, you know, people don't want little kids, and if gay people want little kids, then you should let them have them.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to like and leave a comment below, or even share. Sharing is caring. If you want to see more TYT Nation videos, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYT Nation. Thank you for watching.